That's the whole. So you don't have them.
You know if that note is.
Getting rid of it. No, I don't know.
An owl, have we seen the owl?
Yes.
The speaker?
Can you somewhat the way
Yeah, we
did
can,
it, or did it work well?
Seemed to work well.
Oh,
What's multiple views up on screen at once?
oh, cool.
Counselor Saunders, great to see you.
G'day, g'day.
Mr. Jerkinson with us today?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Windows.
Blanket.
So I'm not sure we'll open any more windows.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will call this meeting to order and welcome to the April 8th, 2024 regular meeting of council. I'd like to start by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish. The people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Qualicum Bowen Island. So welcome to the meeting of April 8th. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. As always, I'd like to introduce the other elected officials who are joining us around the table as well as online. And starting on my far right, we have Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. On her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. On my far left is Councillor Tim Wake. To his right is Councillor Allison Morse. And joining us online today on the screen, right in the bottom there, is Councillor John Saunders.
Applause for John.
And also on the screen, are you able to rename him as well? We have Councillor Alex Durgans joining us as well. We're also joined by members of our professional staff team here this afternoon. On my right is our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards. On my left is our Corporate Officer, Hope Dallas, as well as other members of our staff who will be presenting here today. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comments and question and answer period of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca or on our YouTube channel where it is live streaming to the masses right now. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our community. We are all passionate about what happens here. I would encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct any public comments, questions, and answers during the appropriate periods to myself. For those who are following along online or here in person, the agenda and full council package for this afternoon's meeting is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. And with that, I will look to our corporate officer for the introduction of any late items this afternoon.
There are a few that were circulated by email. The presentation from the consultants that are in the room regarding the tourism Bowen Island plan, and then several letters related to TUPs and the DBP on the agenda.
Thank you. And with that, I will look for a recommendation that council approve the agenda and non-table items for the April 8th, 2024 regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to public comments, I'll look to our corporate officer for any public comments today.
There are none.
There are no public, must not be a very exciting meeting today, even though we have Tourism Bowen here as a delegation. And with that, pardon me? First. That is first. Okay, we'll move on to delegations then. Item 3.1, our delegation from Tourism Bowen Island and Intervista Consulting regarding Bowen Island Tourism Plan and 2023 Visitor Center Report. And I would like to invite the speakers up to the speakers table here in the front.
I just want to make a little joke about how that's an AI generated fire in a forest, and in no way would we encourage or condone a fire.
Well stated, especially as we're about, it doesn't feel like it today, but as we're about to go into the dry season.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Elizabeth Benkin, and I'm Chair of Tourism Bowen Island Association. And with me today is Jody Lorenz, Executive Director of Tourism Bowen Island, and two members of the Tourism Plan Consulting Team, Jordan Young from Intervistas Consulting and Stephen Pierce from Gaining Edge Consulting. We're here today to give you a short presentation of the plan that was created, a community-based responsible tourism plan for Bowen Island. We're very proud to be able to share this with you, this comprehensive report with you and the community.
As the name suggests of this plan was written for the community and outlines initiatives aimed at balancing the values and well-being of residents, environment, economy, and visitors. With 4 strategic goals and over 50 initiatives, this plan, it provides a framework to guide planning and future endeavors. Giving council strategic initiatives to support a tourism management plan, this plan is a timely and relevant one. We hope Mayor and Council will consider endorsing this plan. As part of your council package, you also received a late item, which is Tourism Bowen Island's 2023 Visitor Center Report. This presentation will focus slowly on the responsible visitation plan, but we're happy to answer any questions if you have any about the Visitor Center Report.
Next slide.
The last tourism plan for Bowen Island was created in 2015. And a lot has changed since that time, and also a lot has stayed the same. Aquilicum is a place where people live, people work, and people visit. The close proximity to Vancouver and the region's continued population growth and pressure are significantly impacting Bowen Island. With the desire to improve tourism management and planning, TBI applied for a Tourism Relief Fund grant to develop a management plan. This federal funding enabled the document you have in front of you here today. We are grateful to all our residents, our local businesses, our Squamish Nation community, and regional stakeholders who engaged with us during this process. Your contributions were valuable and informative. This is a community-based vision and a strategy for Bowen Island that draws on progressive principles and adaptations from across the globe, including regenerative tourism, reconciliation, and the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals. Jordan and Stephen will now give you an overview of the plan, the process, and engagement findings. Stephen.
Thank you. So our analysis started with a very strong base of resident engagement. We had 345 touch points, everything from one-on-one surveys to small group discussions to community sessions. I think people would be hard pressed to say that they weren't aware that this was going on. We had quite a process for inviting and inclusion through a resident survey that we undertook at the time this study started, as well as several open houses. We tried to elicit as much community feedback and consultation as possible. And whether people wanted to do that on an individual basis or in group, we were certainly receptive to both opportunities. There's a comprehensive research review of this, including certainly looking at very challenges, particularly the major October period. We're paying particular attention to when vehicular or passenger capacity exceeded the theoretical capacity limits. I won a cap to Travis Beal. We incorporated many of Dave's insights in terms of into our analysis. We looked at population data going back to 2001. And particularly, we looked at how Bowen was tracked far faster than the provincial population, particularly since 2016, where it's grown at almost a rate of 3% per year, which is pretty remarkable. And then we looked out to the projections for 2036, understand what the implications of additional growth would be in terms of the resident base here in Bowen Island. We did a resident sentiment survey. On the resident sentiment survey, we actually had 260 full responses. We had another 100 responses that were partially filled in. We segmented that by tenure in terms of how long people have been on the island, as well as by occupation, to see if there were significant differences of opinion from one segment to the other. We looked at AirDNA and Hamari data in terms of understanding the VRBO and Airbnb performance here, both the number as well as the seasonality and the level of business. We looked at several dozen secondary pieces of work, either done locally, provincially, or internationally, from the Bowen Island Economic Development Plan to, as was mentioned, the UN Sustainable Guidelines on tourism. And we, in fact, recommended that several of those guidelines be used and integrated into the plan that we had prepared for Bowen Island. I think there's a great fit. In terms of the initiatives, we ran them through a lens of looking at 7 dimensions when we're evaluating those initiatives, everything from the timeliness to the resources required, to the cost, to the opportunities for both residents and visitors, and of course, the opportunities that fit with the vision that we envisioned for Bowen Island. And finally, we looked at a number of case studies from innovative communities and communities around the globe that had developed what we thought were interesting practices for managing their visitor economies. We wanted to see what we could learn from that and apply to Bowen Island. Now, the populations were very different, but a common thread that ran through all of them is that they were all community-based practices. In other words, it wasn't an us versus them. It wasn't a tourism initiative that was necessarily being led by the tourism sector. It was a community looking at the challenges with the visitor population and wanting to manage it as effectively as possible to the betterment of the residents that are actually living in these communities. So we thought there were several practices that we wanted to bring to Bowen Island's attention and could be integrated with the plan here. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Jordan. Yep, next slide, please. Oh, sorry. This is one tidbit from the resident survey. And without my glasses, I think we're looking at 65% of respondents agreed that managing visitor management at some level was important. It's one thing to acknowledge the problem. The question is, how do you actually respond to it? And 65% of the residents that we responded to acknowledged that, you know what, we need to look at this proactively as opposed to simply reacting. Now, there's a whole ton that are sitting on the fence, 24%, I think, 22%. Those people are going to come on side once they see substantive progress. Once they see evidence that things are actually getting done, then I think those people would very quickly come into that camp as well, wanting to be part of the solution. This is saying success has 1,000 fathers, failures an orphan. Once you start to show that you're able to put things into progress, that the community is able to advance some of these initiatives, I think you're going to find there's a huge groundswell of support for a community-based approach to visitor management in Bowen Island.
Next slide, please. So in order for Bowen Island to benefit from what the research told us and what the community was telling us, we developed a set of goals and initiatives that help to achieve what a vision might be for Bowen Island. These goals and initiatives looked at visitor management, for how to manage what the visitor experiences while they're on Bowen Island, to what is the infrastructure that those visitors interact with while they're on Bowen Island, be it the ferry coming across, parking, driving, what types of entertainment options they have on island. But to make sure that all these initiatives are successful, we also needed a goal around community alignment, community engagement, around working with stakeholders and partners, not just on Bowen Island, but within the greater region, working with Metro Vancouver, working with Toronto Station, working with everyone that has an invested role in visitors that come here, but also making sure this visitor ecosystem works well. The initiatives that follow under each goal, as Stephen mentioned, we ran them through a specific criteria that looked at the 7 areas, whether it aligns with the community, whether it aligns with sort of the funding process that would make it achievable, as well as, does it make sense? Is it something that is attainable for Bowen Island? We don't necessarily want a initiative that is great to have, but not necessarily achievable. And so we ran these initiatives through an additional set of lenses. Now, overall, there are 57 different initiatives that are bucketed under the 4 goals, but not everything is to be achieved in the first year. It's a 10-year plan. It's a plan that will require many steps to get through each of the initiatives. Within each of some of the initiatives, there's tactics on how to achieve those initiatives, because they're a broad base, they're a large set of, or a large ask in trying to achieve that specific initiative. Now, in developing the vision for what this plan is hoping to achieve, and next slide, please, there are several themes that emerged for what the vision could be. First signature, first theme is around visitation with purpose. Talking around people who have come to Bowen Island have always been visitors before they got here and then started to live on Bowen Island, and talking about that visitation. Bowen Island is known as a place to retreat, replenish, rest, and regenerate. Second theme was around stewardship. Talking around that responsibility to make sure that what is and what makes Bowen Island great is always going to keep that way, and being stewards of the land to conserve it for future generations. The third theme is around community. Belonging and sense of place is important on Bowen Island, and celebrating the creativity and connectedness to look out for one another. And then the fourth theme is around nature. Nature always inspires. It provides us with extraordinary spaces to celebrate life, to recover, and quietly contemplate. It's why people choose to come and live on Bowen Island, but also come to visit. So with that, what is a destination vision? It's a desired future state for the destination. It's something that is aspirational and yet achievable. It's something that you want to strive for in developing this community as a place that people want to visit. It has simple language, yet is memorable for those who read it. It has to be something that the residents though can rally around, but also entice visitors to want to experience it. And so with that, we developed the vision. We envision Bowen Island being a thriving, sustainable community, a place where residents flourish, businesses prosper, ecosystems are preserved for future generations, and visitors are welcomed as contributors to a balanced, resilient, and valued way of life. With this vision, it's not necessarily, oh, sorry, you can stay on this slide for a bit. With this vision, it's something that the rest of the plan rallies around. The goals help support this vision, the initiatives support the goals to support this vision, but it's something also that, as this is a living and breathing document, takes into account the next 10 years. It's not something just for today, but it's something for the next 10 years to help strive towards. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jimmy, or to Liz, sorry, Liz.
Well, and I'm reiterating what Jordan just said. This project is a first step towards creating a regenerative tourism ecosystem on Bowen with the goal of enhancing community well-being. This is a 10-year strategy as a living document, a working document that will require an ongoing alignment, evaluation, and updating. Of the more than 50 initiatives identified, some are quick wins, and some address complex, multi-sectorial community development issues. The success of this plan is dependent upon community support, collaborations, and partnerships.
This plan is a valuable framework to foster engagement, set priorities, guide decision-making, and community planning. Well, Tourism Bowen Island Association will endeavor to lead and contribute to this community-based responsible visitor plan. At this time, and as a small nonprofit organization, TBI has limited fiscal and resource capacities. Wherever we can, we'll continue to advance responsible and regenerative tourism in the area and on the island. And we'll continue to work with our community members, businesses, and our regional stakeholders, including Vancouver Coast and Mountains, Sea to Sky Destination Management Committee, the Squamish Nation, the Kepson House Sound, the Rural Island Partnership. We look forward to further discussions with the municipality on how to move some of these initiatives forward. And we hope council and mayor and council will consider supporting and endorsing this plan. Thank you for your time. We're happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Councillor Morse.
Need a more spot?
Oh, okay, because I thought I saw you roll up one show.
Just a slide on the question.
Since we didn't have any public comments, have they got a little time to run over some of the initiatives under each goal?
Can't see why not.
Sure, I'll pull up.
And do you have a document that I do as well?
Possibly, I think for the benefit of the timing of this council meeting and to balance the interest of the community, maybe just go over each of the sort of strategic buckets generally, instead of going line by line through each initiative. Is that,
How much time?
we'll do 5 or 10 minutes.
Sure, we can just go through the goals.
Okay.
You have a question about each of the goals or?
Well, no, I just thought since there was extra time and I really hadn't talked that much about each of the goals and some of the significant steps.
Okay, so
You might just, the first ones or something like that. Why?
But you wanna start?
Well, visitor management is certainly, Tourism Rhode Island have been managing the visitor center. I mean, when people come here, we want to, as the document shows, support sustainability, address, mitigate problems, enhance the well-being of community residents, help everything from helping visitors find washrooms, which beaches they can go, dog safety, ferry lineup. A lot of time we create resources and things like that. So the visitor management section sort of covers that whole bucket. And there's a number of initiatives there on how we can advance and enhance that and do that better. The listing of the initiatives are not necessarily, it goes A through sort of B, it's not necessarily priority. We would hope that with this document, particular with the staff and council, that we look forward on what initiatives might be able to be moved forward as and set as priorities.
And with each of these goals and initiatives, it's not expected that Tourism Bowen Island takes a lead role on each one. There's a lot of initiatives in here that Tourism Bowen Island has the mandate to roll out the initiative. Tourism Bowen Island can play a supporting role or a monitoring role as well, where they can help launch the initiative, but it really requires the starting of someone else or some different organization to get the ball rolling. Just for example, Initiative C work with BC Ferries and other tourism transportation partners to explore a no-car incentive for visitors to Bowen Island. That really takes into account a lot of stakeholder and a lot of engagement to make that happen, and not necessarily fall solely on Tourism Bowen Island shoulders. Goal number 2, talking about community engagement and collaboration, is really building that foundation for the plan to move forward and helping focus on the advantages of building the relationships and partnerships within the local and regional entities. And in talking through the initiatives, looking at specific areas where maybe in the short term, there's some quick wins that Tourism Bowen Island can work on. But just getting that line of communication out there to know this is a plan that that Tourism Bowen Island is trying to make visitation to Bowen Island beneficial for all, not just the residents, not just visitors, but creating that balance. And it works with partnerships.
And to address council, is that a big priority and need for TBI to push these goals to a realization and adopt and make them useful to our community is we need help from council. Perhaps, this is a starting point. This is a good frame of reference. This is a new way how we can create committees and subcommittees that we get more engagement from perhaps our community members, working with council, working with TBI to move these forward. And it takes a lot of evaluation and what if and looking at it differently. A lot of participation depends on how people get behind an idea and how they feel they're connected to an idea and how they want to participate. And we are in our hut on Cardina by ourselves. And it takes Jody Lorenz, the foot soldier, basically out there most of the time by themselves. And usually how we work is we get funding from somewhere else to hire training to people that are out there, people on the street that are somewhere between 50 and 75 people during high season, almost every hour. That's how the infrastructure has been working. And it needs more support. It needs more planning. And this document, I hope, is really digested and we can all talk about it together to make these realities. Because all these things that are in this document, these are things that people are talking and feeling and understanding that there needs to be change. And the only way we can change is that we have your support and help. We can't do it alone.
A common theme in all the discussions that we had is passion. People that are here are passionate about the island, passionate about what it means, passionate about the quality of life that the island conveys to them. But there's also a concern that there's a tipping point. There's a balance, an equilibrium that people are concerned is being upset. And there's a common need to try to address this in the context of how do we address some of the challenges without sacrificing the quality of life of what it means to live and grow on Bowen Island, raise our kids here. And the reality is that has to be an issue addressed writ large by the entire community. So this is an opportunity to bring together those stakeholders to talk about what are the kinds of things that we can do, both from the perspective of reaching out to the visitor, to try to get them to understand and expect how they contribute to this as they come here, in addition to what needs to take place on the island in terms of our infrastructure to allow us to be more engaging, to be more supportive, to mitigate some of the challenges that we're currently seeing. Because that's the other irony, is that there's a lot that's happening today that was identified years ago. To some degree, COVID was a bit of a catalyst because it got a whole bunch of people on the mainland suddenly aware of what was in their backyard. And that's not going away anytime soon. So to some degree, the issues that we've seen in the past have only continued to percolate up and influence, frankly, the dialogue here in Bowen Island. And I think there is a need for an island solution. Tourism Bowen Island is a catalyst in terms of bringing a solution forward. But again, I go back to some of the examples that we've looked at in doing this plan of communities, destinations that have got it right, that were innovative. And all of them looked at community-based solutions, where they looked at the dialogue between the economic development folks, between the social service folks, between the cultural folks, and the residents to look at what are the solutions that make sense for us. So there's a lot here to digest. And I appreciate the councilor's comments about what are some of the initiatives. There's 50 odd initiatives in here. And I think what they need to be looked at, need to be looked at with thoughtfulness. And I think my suggestion to council would be that there is at least a steering committee or some entity that actually looks at drilling down into some of these, because I think some of them are quick wins and will build that solidarity that we as Bowen Islanders can make a difference and will bring, I think, further focus on what else can be done.
Thank you. I'll look for other questions, Councillor Getty.
I'm not sure that it's a question, but thank you very much for all of this work. I think that, you know, that both the consultants and the people with Bowen Tourism, but when I look at all of the list of initiatives and I'm not sure that there's enough manpower, staff power to set up another steering committee. And I would hope and ask that Bowen Tourism actually start digging into some of these. And it's like, there's 50 initiatives here. Have you had a chance to go through and prioritize ones that you think are the most important or ones that you think are achievable in the short run, or things that need to have more, you know, in connection? I see I'm on the Transportation Advisory Committee and I see some of the recommendations in here for BC Ferries and it's like, oh, yeah, that is aspirational as all. And, you know, I'm not sure who could, you know, and that's possibly maybe not just Bowen Island, but all of the coastal communities. And, you know, what is going on with the larger provincial or coastal initiatives in terms of getting people together to sit down and try and figure out some way of getting more support and help from BC Ferries, as one example. So I would find it really helpful that, I mean, I read through all of these initiatives underneath the different goals, and it's like, they all sound really good. I'm not sure, there's a lot of material there. I'm not sure where to start. And I would find it really helpful if people that are closest to it could actually help us prioritize. It's like, when we did the cultural master plan, there's 50 odd recommendations in that. And, you know, every year they go back and the Arts Council goes back and looks at the top 3 and which are the ones we're going to focus on. So that kind of analysis would be helpful as well.
So just to answer, this is a very dense, comprehensive document, so we presented it as that. It is built out as like a 10-year kind of strategy. And as you point out, and as we've been saying, a lot of these are really complex and they're multi-sectoral and they're multi-stakeholder, and they're not going to happen yesterday. We have put through, and I was here about a year ago, somewhat based on my experience working at the visitor center, some what we thought were quick wins to help, for instance, very partial stuff like that, and changing the heating on the ferry line uplaying, you know, simple quick wins like that. So trying to move them forward, everybody's got limited capacity. I agree with you to pick some of these to work on, but that's not intended. But we wanted to present the complexity and the comprehensiveness of infrastructure. Huge. And tourism, as the introduction says, tourism, you think of it as just people coming for the day, but there's the whole infrastructure issue and management issue and environmental sustainability. So tourism is kind of the confluence of a lot of different things. And that's where we kind of broke it out into those 4 strategic goals. And then within there, the addition, the other initiatives that address or under that strategic goals. So not sure that's kind of a roundabout. I hear what you're saying about setting priorities. And that's kind of where we're here, maybe with council and staff committees. What can be done? Transportation Advisory Committee, what can we move forward? Maybe some of these initiatives go there again. I can present to them what can we move forward.
Councillor Fast.
Sure. Thank you very much for this report. I'm looking forward to reading it in detail. I haven't yet. But I wanted to see your presentation, and it would be interesting to look at it with the report from the visitor center as well, just to sort of get the context. So I'm interested in this word regenerative that you used, Liz, at the beginning, and I can see it is all through the text here, the idea of actually making things sustainable, if not actually better. It's what it looks like. It's staying here, and but I also see the word infrastructure, as you just pointed out, Jody mentioned a bunch of times as well. What kinds of infrastructure, just off the top of your head, if you're able to say, do you mean?
It's,
I can read it. It's okay.
yeah,
I don't wanna
it's the whole
put you on the
gamut.
spot.
It's the whole
I mean,
gamut, like, for me, infrastructure means support on many levels with the municipalities and the residents. And I think infrastructure is really means, what is your, what are you standing on? Okay, who's gonna show up? What are you standing on? What you can build? And, you know, it's basically also saying, what do we want to achieve? How can we get our committee, our people together to give them jobs, to give them research? A lot of this all of this involves research. It's a lot of homework. It's not like how we can just go to the store and buy these initiatives and buy these goals. And it's constantly having people to commit and review. And that, to me, infrastructure is people and money.
Thanks. I look forward to reading it in detail. I didn't mean to put anybody on the spot or anything, but I was just intrigued by the idea of regenerative and the idea of infrastructure together there. Thanks.
Yeah, if you look at, I mean, it's from everything. It's infrastructure from pre-planning, you know, having the ability to try to capture visitors before and tell them to walk on the ferry. You know, our website does that. How do we get that message out? To infrastructure on the island. How do we, you know, like we try to direct people to beaches that have outhouses. We need more washrooms, water fountains, roads. I mean, infrastructure, places for people to stay, whatever. I mean, it does go through quite a few. A lot of it also talks about policy and tourism Bowen Island. And one of them is referring to working with the municipality to define what tourism Bowen Island actually does. Is it tourism Bowen Island that's going to do this, or is this a municipality? So there's quite a gamut. It's quite, like I said, comprehensive. But yeah, I mean, we're hoping that this document will strengthen our relationship with the municipality, with the community. Regenerative tourism is not a new principle. It's being practiced across the globe. It addresses the climate change, the all sorts of things. So everything's interwoven. It's pretty complex. But yeah, to your point, what are we going to focus on? What can we do? What do we have the resources and capacity to do? Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Morris, the last follow-up.
Sorry, one of the letters we got in today was, are you gonna do public presentation or awareness or get together all the people that came from the focus groups and do a presentation of the plan? You know, an hour and a half, a real workshop type thing?
Yeah, absolutely, we can. One of the initiatives that we would like to do is set up for community members who are interested to keep the, like I said, this is a community building thing. And so, yeah, this plan took a lot longer than we had hoped because we wanted to create something that would be of value. It's comprehensive. Yes, we want to get this out into the community and foster engagement.
I think all the people that came to the focus groups would probably want to come and see their finished thing as well as maybe bring a friend with them.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
This should be read and accessible to everyone on the site.
Yeah, well, you've got it on your website, I assume.
Via a QR code and the undercurrent. And we put it on Bowen Island, everything else. We have to make this accessible. How do you do that? Make it user friendly, make it low real. And there's different ways to get it out. You can, put it out in the paper. Everyone should, and that's why we worked on it for so long and discussed every little thing that went into this because we want it to be user friendly for everyone on the island, and they should be able to access it and read it over and over again. That's what a living document is. Whether they choose to participate in it, but they should have the information.
So you have it posted on?
We haven't posted on it yet.
We wanted to
just
release
brought it to
this,
you guys.
see you guys first, before we go up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we want to hear all your feedback. This is just opening the door to it.
Great. Well, thank you for coming to present today. This has been a great report to read. I had the opportunity, as you know, to participate in one of the focus groups last year with several dozen members of our community from a wide variety of sectors. I appreciate the focus on sustainability and grappling with those questions, as you mentioned, of feeling the pressures of tourism on a small community and the impacts on infrastructure and the intersection that exists between Tourism Bowen Island and the municipality, because it is a challenging place. You know, I remember in this moment, I recall last fall being at UBCM and talking to Councillor Saunders, who came out of a session about tourism, and there's the sense in many quarters, I think, that tourism is just great and we should promote it full stop. But I think small communities and small neighborhoods, and you know, there's a few in Metro Vancouver, and I think we're one of the top ones that, because we're small, because we have limitations in terms of systems and services to our growth, that it creates a tension within the community. And I appreciate the Tourism Bowen and the consultants who have worked to balance that. So it's something that council will look at. I'm sure our committees will look at, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of it in the future. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Moving on to section 4, the consent agenda. I will look to council for any items that councillors would like to pull from the consent agenda. Councillor Best.
I'd like to pull 12.9 in the info items.
I was in full as well.
Okay, 12.9 from Councillor Fast. Any other items that council would like to pull from the consent? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Morse. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None, and that carries unanimously. Down to 12.9, which is Richard Allen regarding the idea of a chipping service to replace compost facility on Bowen. Over to you, Councillor Fast.
Sure, I would just, people had a chance to read this letter, I expect, and it's, since now we're not going to be going forward with the composting facility, what do we do when we have a big storm and we've got all these branches down in terms of managing the fuel? So my proposal was just to, very simple. It's that council refer Richard Helm's letter to the Emergency Program Executive Committee
A motion
for information.
for information. Okay, so a motion to refer for information. Seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion on this, Councillor Wake?
So I think that's a good idea. I think it goes beyond the emergency situation. A good proportion of our compostable material is with various sorts and sizes. And so we could reduce the amount we're having to truck off the island if we could chip that all up as well, collect it separately from kitchen waste compost. So I don't know if the maybe add the environment committee. Referral.
An amendment to, assuming it's a proposal to add an amendment to refer to the environment.
To add the environment committee to the referral.
Okay, is there a second for that amendment? Second by Councillor Fast. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And over to you, Councillor Morse.
Which staff member looks after the composting or the green waste program? Is that Public Works or?
It's, we contract that out to Bowen Waste Services,
Yeah.
and that contract is managed in part by finance and environment. So Carla, Kristen.
So ECAP, because I wanted it to go to the staff person, so that, fine.
Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Fast.
There was some advertising in this week's undercurrent about small loans, short-term.
Grants.
From the
Two
community foundation.
responsible people in each NERC district to supervise. Chippers are dangerous things to operate, so there has to be somebody that knows what they're doing. But, I think that plus, there was some sort of a work party out in Blue Water recently. I don't know if I didn't see your smiling face in the photograph, but
I was taking the pictures.
there was a group of people that took it upon themselves. So it's getting a container and getting a chipper and using the chips once it's down. So it's it might be something that could be community oriented as opposed to staffing, which would be ideal.
That's fast.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate all these ideas. It's a good discussion to have since we've just had that big snowstorm and the chainsaws are still buzzing and the smoke is still rising. So I on the next emergency program executive committee agenda is also a letter from Tom I can't remember his name, Swan, about the idea of burn piles and how Metro Vancouver's restrictions and their air quality, the way that they measure what is a good burn day has been so reduced, so that now there's only relatively few burn days in a year, and it's hard to get a permit. And whereas in the past that used to be handled by our fire department in terms of when was a burn day. And anyway, that letter is also on the emergency program executive committee agenda. So I'm hoping we can look at it a little bit just from this summer coming up kind of point of view. And also whether we want to start thinking about a different bylaw or a different service. And I'm happy that it's going to go to the Environment and Climate Action Committee too. That's great. The more conversation about these, there's sort of changes in the regulatory environment as well as changes in the climate with the extreme weather, we have to think about fuel and like in terms of fuel buildup on the forest floor, but also water availability and all these other things that are changing. So I'm hoping that at the Emergency Program Executive Committee, I think I'm chairing the next one anyway, so hopefully we can make some recommendations to council, but get them thinking started. That's the idea of forwarding the letter is all.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. And just to Councillor Getty's point, I would be remiss as a resident of the Blue Water neighborhood if I didn't speak a little bit about what happened there over the weekend. There was two local residents who did put an application for the Bowen Island Community Foundation grant. A chipper was secured, and about 40 or 50 residents of the neighborhood over the course of the day came out with the help of Ian Stewart, who had the chipper, and Trevor Hodge, who was there all day flagging traffic, and residents just dragged their chipped materials out to the curb, and the entire Windjammer Loop, Spyglass, Captain's Way, the whole thing got chipped in a day. And it was a hard work party, as my lower back is telling me now, and it's going to be difficult to get out of this chair, but also really worthwhile, I think, to bring the community together, and particularly as a community initiated endeavor. So with that, seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question on the recommendation to refer. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, and that carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to section 6, business arising from the minutes. 6.1, strategic plan update, ratification of resolutions from the March 18th, 2024 closed committee of the whole meeting. The recommendation did get left off the agenda. However, the corporate officer has provided it to me, and it reads,
The council approved the 2024 strategic plan update as amended at its March 18th, 2024 closed committee of the whole meeting.
can I have someone move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion? The only discussion I'll add before calling the question is that this was a long process for council, as it always is. It's However, it's always really beneficial and feels really constructive when I'm in those meetings with council to, and staff, to take a look at the big picture and to take a look at the overview of what it is that we're trying to accomplish in this year and in this term. And that was the process that the strategic plan update undertook. Last year, when we came together, council identified 4 main themes that we were looking to accomplish this term, from a diverse and resilient community, strong infrastructure and asset management, engaged community and effective government, and responsible ecosystem protection. And what we've done, and folks who really want to, nerd out on municipal policy and initiatives, want to read the strategic plan. When you look at the plan, we've identified some clear targets for 2024 and 2025 that we'd like to take on. So there's lots of good stuff in there. Happy to answer any questions that the community might have. We would welcome any letters and any feedback the community might have. And with that, see no further discussion. I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Moving on to 6.2, Development Variance Permit DVP 2024-0038, Snug Cove House. We have our Manager of Planning and Development here today to give us an update on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a brief presentation for this one, but I'm happy to forego to if you fill the application. All right. So this is a variance permit application at 1082 Miller Road, associated with Snug Cove House for a seniors housing development. So located here on Miller in the Snug Cove. Just in terms of where we are in this process, so this application was made in January of this year. It was introduced to council on March 11th, 2024. We conducted notice before that introduction and then following as well, coming to you today for consideration of a final decision for the variance permit. This is the public feedback we've received. There have been 2 letters of support and 2 with concerns, right? And in that Foxglove development, we haven't received any additional letters since the March introduction. So these were on the agenda at that meeting. And what we did receive after the meeting was just a letter from the applicant noting council discussion with the sort of how the Snug Cove House proposed development interacts with the vacant lot 12 next to it, and just wanting to stress that their proposal is not to construct a large retaining wall on that border, but a small retaining wall with a fence on top as a privacy screen for the neighbor. So the staff recommendation is that council issue this development variance permit.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. I'll look to council for questions or comments. Councilor Morris.
Can you put the picture back up, Daniel?
Yes.
Sorry, John, get rid of you. So just so I understand, where is the piece that's the 10-foot wall being built?
The 10-foot wall itself is actually at the front, that's in part of the variance, is at the front of the property. There's a tall, it's not in this image, but at the front where there's a generator. And then along this border too, I believe it might be 10 feet, where if you see the fence itself.
Fence is the vertical lines, right?
Yeah, so the fence and the retaining wall together would reach that height. So that the retaining wall is above grade at this portion of it, and then the fence goes up above that.
So that was my question, and so the fence gets counted in the height.
Yeah, the height of the fence would be counted from grade, so at the bottom of the retaining.
So the retaining wall itself is not 10 feet above.
Yeah.
Because I was having a little trouble thinking, well, the fence was maybe 6 feet, how did that was grade then 10 feet?
Yeah.
So it's 10 feet in, including the fence. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments for the planner? Councilor Fast.
Going to move the motion.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. And I'll just say, having seen this in the previous go-rounds, I'm delighted to have it in front of us again, and I'm pleased to move that council issue development variance permit DVP 2024-0038 for 1082 Miller Road, legally described as Lot 13, District.
Just as legally described in the recommendation is good.
Legally described as legally described.
Okay. Moved by Counselor Fast. Seconded by Counselor Wake. Any further discussion on the motion? Counselor Wake.
Just to reiterate what others have said, I was quite concerned after our last meeting about that wall, the wall, and trying to figure out from the drawing where it was. But I think Mr. Ritchie's explanation and what we heard today, I don't see it as a problem, huge problem or inconvenience. So I'll support it.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any,
Aye in favor.
okay, and that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Moving on to 6.3, temporary use permit for 604 Grafton Road. Again, over to our manager of planning and development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an application for a temporary use permit at 604 Grafton. 604 Grafton is a currently vacant lot located off the main road, past the intersection of Mount Gardner Road before you intersect with Carter Road. It's zoned CD11, which permits a gas station on the site, but has never been developed as a gas station. And so the application is for a temporary use permit to construct a temporary building to build prefabricated foam panels. So this as well was introduced to you at the March 11th meeting. Notice was given for that meeting and then subsequently after the meeting to an expanded area. And we are before you today for consideration of the permit itself. So this is that expanded notice bridge on the 300 meter boundary. Staff note here received one letter of support and one letter of concern. I believe it would be 2 letters of concern for people outside of the notice area. And the recommendation is council issue the temporary use permit for 604 Grafton Road for the light manufacturing use.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin. I will look to council for any questions or comments for the planner. Councilor Morse, followed by Councilor Getty.
I just noticed in one of the comments was made that this was a new business that wasn't on the island. But Kiwi, I believe, is established business on the island.
Yes, Kiwi, yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Getty.
Follow up on that. There's a distinction in terms of the company is here, but the manufacturing is not yet. This is what they're applying for. Is that correct?
Correct. They don't currently manufacture panels on.
Somewhere in this material, there's a letter from somebody that says that the questions have been asked about noise and that there's just going to be the hum of nailing machines or something. I can't remember. It's like, I don't think of it as a hum. So has that been taken into consideration in terms of what the noise that's going to be generated by this business?
So we received, yes, a letter from somebody with questions or like a letter to staff asking questions about the application. So we followed up with the applicant, right? And so they provided that response we wanted to include in the agenda. And I think my initial response was just that this business would have to comply with our noise bylaw. Other businesses would have like hours of operation and expectation of reasonable noise.
So it's not a very early start and it's not a very late continuation, but is it going to be a steady hammering for the 5 days, 9 to 5 that it's open? Do we know?
I don't know if I could answer that.
I would think that that is the concern that's been raised at this point, and that assuming for the moment that the TUP will be granted, I would think that the company needs to understand that that is potentially a problem in terms of any plans for renewal.
Councilor Morse.
You can't carry on a construction business of any kind without making a noise. And I was along on a property on Adams Road the other day, and it's amazing the amount of noise that comes from businesses that are around there. So I don't think and this is a much more industrial area than what down here. You got all the noise from the traffic and everything else. So I don't think any noise this would generate would be an issue. As long as they follow our noise bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Fast?
I'm actually prepared to move this motion too, if you permit. And I'll speak to it briefly after that.
Yes, absolutely.
I move that council issue temporary use permit TUP 0303 2023 for a light manufacturing use for 604 Grafton Road, legally described in the motion.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Fast to speak to the motion, followed by Councillor Wake.
Just that I'm in favor of this motion because prefab panels that are to zero, whatever that phrase is, zero emissions, what is it? Anyway, zero energy, I think is all good environmental thinking, and creating these on island also reduces the footprint of the travel back and forth, and it just seems to me to be a win-win from the climate, from the emissions, and from the zero energy side of things, and I like the idea of localization, so I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Wake.
Similar to what Councillor Fast has said, this is the direction that everyone is going in terms of off-site manufacturing of housing rather than on-site stick framing. Having to go for weeks or months on end with building exposed to the weather. And it's really going to help us create some of the smaller, more affordable units that we need. So I'm in support.
Thank you, Councillor Wake. I will also speak in support. I note that this was originally zoned as a comprehensive development zone, and the original intention was to create housing, but with the inability to create housing in Snug Cove now with the sewer. That was originally going to be a gas station, I believe. I think this is still a good use of the property, particularly for temporary use until the sewer issue gets corrected, until housing can be built on that site, and also enable housing to be built on other parts of the island in a way that's local and takes into consideration affordability issues. It seems like a positive development for the island, at least for the next couple of years. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Moving on to 6.3, 7.1, our financial plan bylaw, number 647. We have Chief Financial Officer with us here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Through the mayor, I would like to present a draft year five-year financial plan. It's before council today for consideration. The bylaw contains a proposed property tax increase of 9.5%. This increase is required as a result of many factors. To start with the operating side, there is significant increases, many beyond the just the cost of inflation. Estimated costs of our operating our new community center is included in this budget, as well as additional 0.4 FTE for the fire department. Other staffing changes have been accommodated within the existing FTE through interdepartmental reallocations of existing resources. On the capital side of expenditures, we do have significant increases in contributions to statutory reserves. These reserves, of course, are what fund our investments in our capital renewal and replacement. Total contributions to both statutory and non-statutory reserves this year are just over $3.2 million. And out of our property tax levy of $8.2 million, that represents almost 39% of that property tax levy. So many of these projects, these capital projects, have long been deferred And to be honest, we're literally at the end of the road from a deferred maintenance perspective. We can't continue to defer these renewal and replacement projects every year. Some of the planned capital projects include the replacement of Carter Road Bridge. There is included replacement of the Headwaters Park Boardwalk. We have $500,000 renewal of roads projects. We have renewal of our community wharfs and docks, and as well replacement of the self-contained breathing apparatus for the volunteer fire department. Some of the significant investments include in infrastructure replacement for Blue Water, Eagle Cliff, and Snug Cove Sewer. And of course, we plan to complete the community center construction. Most of that funding gap has been addressed through the use of the Growing Communities Fund. Our total debt servicing costs are just over $1 million this year. A ratio of property tax collection established by this bylaw is a continuation of the long-standing one-to-one relationship for residential and business properties. The ratio for light industrial properties is unchanged at 4.6 times the residential rate. Unchanged for farm properties, 0.5% of the residential rate. And for utility properties, the rate this year would be set at 17.87 times. And that is the maximum that could be charged in order to ensure that the property tax rate on utility properties does not exceed $40 per $1,000 of value. All of the water rates and the 2024 financial plans for the utility warm water systems have been approved by the local area service committees. There will be additional rates and parcel tax bylaws brought forward to the next council meeting for consideration. The average impact to a property owner this year will be approximately $317 per year for the municipal property tax portion of their bill. And just quickly to recap the public process to date, we brought the plan first to the Finance Advisory Committee on December 8th. It was then brought to a council committee of the whole on December 13th. We had 2 budget open houses on January 18th and January 25th. And lastly, we held the budget meetings with all of the water and sewer committees throughout the month of March. So there is a statutory requirement to adopt this financial plan and a tax rate bylaw prior to May 15th of every year. So I do plan to bring the remaining water and sewer bylaws and the property tax bylaw forward at the next council meeting. That will provide adequate time for council to adopt the financial plan and tax rate bylaws before the statutory date of May 15th. That will not require any special meetings or any meetings outside of regularly scheduled council meetings. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions from council. The staff recommendation is that the financial plan bylaw be read for a second and third time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. I will look to council for any questions or comments about the financial plan for staff. Councilor Getty?
In your report on page 6, where you're talking about the Schedule A, the first row for property tax, there's a percentage beside the number, like for 2024, the 8 million plus 26.7%. Is that the percentage of the total budget?
No, percentage of total revenue.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. Any further questions or discussion?
I didn't have any questions because I went back through my notes and I'm at some point, I'm hoping that we can discuss the one-to-one ratio of business versus residential. Because I find it, I mean, I looked at the whereases, I'm on page 2 of 3 of the actual bylaw itself here that has the little table. And I know we made a decision earlier this year and we've talked about it in previous years about is there an appreciable difference between benefits delivered or demands made upon infrastructure between residential and businesses? And right now, we've left it at 1-to-1. again. And I'm hoping in the future we can look at the, whatever information we have from business licensing, or whether we're able to bring in the municipal regional district tax, those kinds of things to help even that out, because I see more cars coming off the ferry, and I remember even years ago, neighbors speaking about how their steep little road was getting torn up by people who didn't know how to drive on it. And those kinds of things don't necessarily get reported because they're neighbors and old family friends and sometimes relatives. Anyway, I'm just hoping we can look at that sometime, but otherwise, I was able to answer all my questions in my notes, and I appreciate the way it's laid out very clearly, and also that I liked seeing how when we get down into future years like 2026, that we're not having to, that everything's gonna settle down a little bit after this big infrastructure hill that we've been climbing. And so looking across at the future years, I feel confident, and I'd be happy to move the motion.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Morris.
I just wanted to clarify and make sure my understanding is BC Assessment does not include as the property of somebody's home where they're running a B&B or a short-term rental as business property.
No, I don't think so. I think those would still be classified as residential. Yeah, for sure.
So the only business loans really are the ones that are in the code, and they're only 2% of the values.
Yes.
Thank you. My only comments are that I appreciate the work that's been done on this budget. When I talk to my colleagues in other areas of the region and the province, I think many municipalities are struggling with these issues of deferred maintenance, infrastructure deficit, and then combined with the exacerbating effects of cost escalations and inflations. I'm curious if we know what the tangible impact of inflation and cost escalations have been on our budget, or is that something that's even possible to tease out?
Certainly, when you look at our operating costs in our budget, the vast majority, of course, is wages. Almost 2/3 of it is wages from the operating side. So given what collective agreements have been settling at across the region, you'll see those are very closely mirroring the cost of living allowances. What's outside of that, of course, are fuel costs, which don't track inflation, and also a significant one for us is the cost of insurance premiums, which are far and above in excess of cost of living allowances. I think there's a lot of uncertainty as to how long this inflationary effect is going to stick around for. So most of my colleagues are planning for continued increases annually around 5% at least. So until we see those interest rates start to come down a little bit, I think that it's more prudent to suppose that they are going to consider that they're going to be somewhere around 5 to 7% in future years. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. And with that, I will go back to Councillor Fast to move the recommendation, please.
Sure, thank you. I move that bylaw number 647, 2024, cited as Bowen Island Municipality 2024 to 2028 Financial Plan bylaw number 647, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time.
Seconded by Councillor Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen, and that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Double thank you. I'll give you a proper thank you when we come back to adopt it.
Thank you.
Moving on to section 8, staff reports 8.1, temporary use permit for 1612 Joan Audrey Lane. We have our manager of planning and development here.
Thank you. So I'm back with another application for a temporary use permit. This one being introduced to council at this meeting. This one is at 1612 Audrey Lane on the west side of Bowen Island. Joan Audrey Lane is a fairly recent road, and at the top of Joan Audrey Lane, there's a small cul-de-sac subdivision. And 1612 is one of the properties in that on that cul-de-sac. It's located in a zone that's Area 1 of CD18, which is the Arbutus Ridge Comprehensive Development Zone. And interestingly, this zone permits dwelling, but does not permit home occupation use, including bed and breakfast use, and does not permit RGA use. The application, therefore, is an application for a residential guest accommodation use. So the owners want to offer the dwelling as a short-term rental for this summer of 2024, and then for intermittent use over the next 3 years. They would continue to reside in the house, and it would remain their principal residence. So staff took some look through our land use bylaw, trying to sort of ascertain or provide information for council on like why, how uncommon is it for us not to allow this RGA use? And so there's only a handful of single family zones on Bowen that don't permit the RGA use. So other similar zones, Area 9 of CD6, so is around Seymour Bay Drive, Russell Lane, doesn't permit the RGA use. Area 5 of CD20, which is on Forester Lane on Grafton Lake, doesn't permit the RGA use. But other than that, essentially all of the single family zones on Bowen permit the RGA use. It's not permitted often in multi-family zones or where it's accessory use, but this is sort of an anomaly. So staff in the temporary use permit that's being introduced to you, staff are proposing a condition on the TUP that it be operated by a principal resident of the lot. So similar to the provincial requirements that council has directed staff to opt into and would come into effect November 1st of this year. I will say too, for this application, as the notice has gone out, the most common sort of question I've received from people is some variant of, didn't council just ban short-term rentals? Why would you consider a temporary use permit? So sort of to emphasize for this, that this zone is a different circumstance on Bowen, and that it's not normally permitted, and the application is to permit similar to would be permitted in other zones on Bowen that do permit the RGA use, just for context. So where we are, we received the application in February. We sent the notice out before this introduction. Letters are in the agenda. And then for council consideration, it would be a notice period and a final decision in May. The applicant provided with their application letters of support for all the properties in that Joan Audrey Lane cul-de-sac. We've received since then 1 letter of support and 3 letters of opposition outside of the notice area. And so the staff recommendation is to give the notice that council would be considering the permit May 13th meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. We have Councillor Jurgensen, followed by Councillor Morse, followed by Councillor Wake.
Audio now unmuted.
To the planner through the chair, I have to question when I see a zone where something isn't permitted, whereas it's permitted in most zones. There clearly probably was a reason that was done in the first place, and trying to understand why was this originally not permitted in this zone? What was is there any knowledge on what the original intent of not permitting it within this complex development area?
Thank you. So through the chair, this zone predates my time here on Bowen, but I do know they have the developer of this zone recently applied for, or a few years ago, but applied for an amendment to the zone to allow secondary suites. So this is one of the few zones that doesn't allow secondary suites as well. And in reviewing that, we went back to the original council reports of it, and there's almost no mention of why things were like that. So I would say originally when this zone went forward, it didn't allow secondary suites and it didn't allow home occupation use. So at the time, no zones permitted RGA use. And when the RGA use, when that bylaw was done, what we did is we amended the land use bylaw to add the RGA use everywhere that allowed bed and breakfast use. So the RGA wasn't included in this zone because it didn't allow bed and breakfasts. And it's not clear from the record why home occupation bed and breakfast use was not permitted.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Morse, who was just shaking in her seat to provide some context. It's all, I'm just going to swap the speakers list. So we'll go Councillor Morse, followed by
Sorry, I thought I
Councillor.
was first on the speakers.
Yeah.
The reasoning behind going back to when it was done was entirely because of the water availability and water issues. So none of the water advisory committees were supportive of having bed and breakfasts or secondary suites. And the water was scarce, and the scarcity of issue in water and blue water, where it was from was the prime reason behind that.
Okay.
And I guess that's one of our letters has come in at this point. Can we put a condition in the top that the water meter is read more frequently? Especially during the summer months, because people that don't live here on the island don't necessarily have the same concern about use of water.
So the chair, I would have to consult with our public works department in terms of what would be feasible in that regard.
Yeah, I think that becomes a bit about the two individual water meter readings.
Just for a process clarification, though, given that this is just notice, that consultation could happen between now and the time it comes back for consideration.
Yes, and just to add to that, I did refer that letter that was received over the weekend to our director of engineering, but obviously this morning.
Thank you. Councillor Wake, followed by Councillor Saunders and Councillor Fast.
My question was the same, so it's been answered. Thank you.
Over to you, Councillor Saunders.
Thanks. It isn't directly related to this particular application, but the discussion around STRs has primarily been about providing places for people that are working on Bowen. There's nowhere for them to live and that kind of thing. I don't know if this is doable or not, if it's this feasible even, but is it possible to add conditions to these types of things, that something along the lines of we'd allow this if the renter is someone who's employed on Bowen Island somewhere? I'm not looking for a fulsome discussion on this. It just popped into my mind, and I don't even know if that's possible and worth having a discussion at another time.
The chair, I would have to research, I think, what would be possible with regards to a condition like that.
Okay, just wanted to raise it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. As I recall, this from many years ago when I was on a committee of some kind, one of the central pieces for this comprehensive development, besides water availability, was also what you'll see on Daniel's report about the support a cottage residential development, providing supportive housing and services for the residents of the development. And as I recall, this was, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Mr. Martin, this was a circle of little cottages around a wetland or something like, or gardens, I forget, but around an open space. And similar to multifamily, which you mentioned, as a place where bed and breakfasts weren't always, secondary suites weren't always permitted. This was for people with disabilities of some kind, as I recall, and it was designed to be inclusive so that people with developmental disabilities, I can't speak to what I recall exactly, but I'm pretty sure that there was supposed to be quite a special community that might need special protection, and that the design of the neighborhood was planned around them. So this might be part of the reason that originally bed and breakfasts were not. Does this fit with what you've been reading?
I'm just reply. So that is what the permitted use of area 2 of the zone is. So slightly further down the hill, we have a housing agreement bylaw that governs development of that property, and that is the cottage residential development that's
Right.
proposed, and then area one, which exists here, and then further south in the zone, just permits market housing.
And
So-
are there not trails that run between them? They're not.
There are interconnected trails. Yes.
Yeah. So I think, they're neighborhoods next to each other, connected by trails and so for the well-being of that future supported housing community, for the water availability issue, I'd be reluctant to begin to permit a new use to be established in there. I think water comes first, and the neighborhood, the community that has been planned there. I don't see the community benefit from permitting this. I'd prefer to support our own direction in terms of maintaining our what we just did about opting in to the bill. I can't remember the numbers, sorry.
One of the many that the
One of the
province
many,
is
the principal residence.
incredibly bombing us with.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I can't keep them all straight in terms of their reference numbers, but in terms of the direction we just made in order to opt into the provincial regulations coming down on use of residences as vacation rental places. I won't be supporting this even going out to notice. I think the proponent has already canvassed their neighbors for letters of support. I think that's really hard not to support something when your neighbor that you might really treasure, your relationship with that neighbor might be a wonderful person, but it's hard to write a negative letter. And it's also, I think we should be zoning for we should be thinking about the design of the community, the resources there, the feeling of protection perhaps for the vulnerable community, and thinking about that as opposed to the individuals who might be wonderful people, but properties do change hands. And once a use is established in a neighborhood, then it's harder to make changes later. So I think we should just hold the position on this, and I won't be voting in favor of giving the notice because it's contrary to the direction that we've been taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Jurgensen.
Press CMD plus.
The supportive cottage residential, on area 2, I share the same concern as Councillor Fast when it comes to its proximity to this on area 1.
It looks like you're done.
However, I would want to go back to I would have a question for the developer of area 2, because I do recall that from my reading of this project that one of the tenants on area 2 would be a cafe or cafe-like business that would support that cottage residential community. And I think it's important to understand whether something like having B&Bs in area 1 would help to promote the business in area 2, thereby leading to the success of the cottage residential application. So I would want to get some additional information on that, just to understand how all these pieces fit together.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Councillor Getty.
I think our discussion that we recently had on STRs is, the timing on this application is really poor in terms of linking it so closely with that. But, the support from the neighbors indicate that these people would be responsible and caring and probably take some effort in terms of finding people that would fit in and all the rest of it. So that it's an argument that I agree with, but I'm not entirely sure it's the strongest argument against this. And I think that the water is, and, the letter that we got from Blue Water Park, is one thing, but there was also the minutes of the local area council for King Edward Bay, and their major well has silted in, and that's a new problem that is very concerning to the King Edward Bay local water district. And so in any kind of an increase in terms of potential usage, and that would, I think, be the definition of a bed and breakfast or a short-term rental, that would be of major concern. So we can give the neighbors an opportunity to speak up on this, but I would put the proponents on notice that I would probably be voting against it ultimately in terms of the water, and I don't see how they could possibly come up with an alternative to satisfy that, so.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. I think in similar terms, I'm also mixed on this. Particularly given the level of support from the neighborhood, I found that interesting. You know, all the surrounding properties agree with it and seem to be in favor of it. That also leads me to wondering that given it's not part of the zoning and given that they're looking for temporary use, you know, whether a more appropriate route is to seek a rezoning for that area and have the public and council be able to weigh in more fully. I'm also concerned about the water on the west side. So we know that there's building moratorium in Blue Water right now. We know that there's recent issues in King Edward Bay with sediment appearing in one of their 3 wells, which I don't think we have. We're waiting on some answers as to why that is and why that's occurring. That said, I don't have any particular issues in giving notice and giving some more thought on some of these questions, but at this point, really, I'll take direction from council on it.
A question for the planner. 100 meters seems like a small, from my limited memory of walking around in that area, would that capture all households in that neighborhood, or would it go beyond to some of the bigger areas? I'm just wondering about whether we should make it 300 or more meters.
Right, through the chair, I put up the map that we created. I mean, it's like the internal ones, it's not the cleanest, but essentially the yellow background properties are within 100 meters. So it makes it about, halfway down to Audrey Lane. So it captures the immediate neighbors. It doesn't capture anything definitely as far as Windjammer.
Yeah. So I would prefer to make it 300 meters in order to capture more of King Edward, well, all those neighborhoods there.
Or possibly just name King Edward Bay, Bowen Bay, and Blue Water. Which is, that is a lot of paper that's going in. Councilor Morse.
The map, can I just, so the yellow area is park or housing or what?
Right, the yellow background are the people who received the notice.
Oh, okay.
They're within 100 meters.
So we haven't got all the sub area 1, 2, and 3 showing on that map.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, that map is that we generate internally to confirm we've notified all the properties and here for context.
Okay, so to move us along, the recommendations here that notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of temporary use permit for residential guest accommodation use at 1612 John Audrey Lane, as legally described in the recommendation, and that council authorize staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of temporary use permit TUP 2024-0041 in accordance with Section 94 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 1612 John Audrey Lane, as legally described in the recommendation. Is there a mover and seconder for those recommendations?
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Saunders. Seconded by Councillor Morse. Any discussion on the recommendations? Councillor Saunders to speak to his motion.
Just to say that, well, I'm register the same concerns that have been voiced here, particularly concerning water. This is early stages, and maybe there is some answers out there if we give the opportunity to get a little bit deeper discussion with the neighbors and see what everybody really thinks, especially if they're watching this and go, oh yeah, the water, which could happen for some people who originally were in support of it. I'd like to hear back from them on what they see in terms of what we discussed this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Fast.
Seeing as how the motion has now been moved and seconded, I would like to move an amendment that the 100 meters be changed to 300 meters.
Is there a seconder for that amendment?
I'd second.
Seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion on the amendment? I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the motion now reads 300 meters instead of 100 meters. And we're back to the main motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Councillor Fast.
Just that I still won't be moving for the motion. This is just in case it passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor of issuing notice, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Renee.
That carries. The motion carries with Councillor Fast and Councillor Getty in opposition. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Moving on to 8.2, participation in the Municipal Protected Areas Project. We have our Manager of Environment and Parks Planning here, who will be joining us at the front.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am actually just going to introduce representatives of the project to present for you today. Kemper Beckett, who is the Conservation Coordinator for BC Nature, and Andrew Banks, the Project Manager for the Municipal Protected Areas Project. And I'll just give them the floor. Thanks.
Thanks. Welcome to our meeting here. I can see you virtually. You're also back on the screens here behind me. So whenever you're ready, feel free to go ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. Just going to share my screen here. Okay. Is that visible?
Yes, you can see it.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that introduction and for having us here today to speak about the Municipal Protected Areas Project. Andrew and I are located in Vancouver, so we would like to acknowledge that we are working on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. BC Nature is a federation of naturalist clubs across the province, with more than 56 different clubs that are all very well-intentioned nature enthusiasts, and we have a lovely mission to know nature and keep it worth knowing. This mission led to the taking on of this new project called the Municipal Protected Areas Project, which is a collaborative initiative to advance Canada's commitment made at COP15 to protect at least 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. You may have heard of this commitment referred to as the 30 by 30 target. Andrew?
Thanks. So the Municipal Protected Areas Project is a Canadian project with the following partners to BC Nature: Nature Canada, Ontario Nature, Wildlands League, and the Canadian Alliance of Land Trusts. Environment and Climate Change Canada is financially supporting this project. Next slide, please. So where do we stand? So as of 2023, federally, we've got 13.7% of our lands protected and on the conservation database. And here in BC, we're ahead slightly. We're at 19.7%, which is good news. Next slide, please. So achieving Canada's biodiversity goals requires a comprehensive approach from all levels of government. The federal government is aware of the amount of land suitable for the conservation database on a federal and provincial level, but they don't have the data for protected areas owned or managed by local governments. It is recognized that local governments own or manage lands that are rich in biodiversity, It's also recognized that these rich biodiversity lands are close to communities and are important to these communities for many reasons, ranging from easy access to nature to playing a critical role in local adaptation to climate change. As such, local governments have a unique opportunity to contribute to Canada's 30 by 30 commitment. Next slide, please. So why would or should local governments participate in the Municipal Protected Areas project? This project enables local governments to assist with national commitment at a local level, allows local governments to validate their approach and policy for protection of local natural areas. It provides recognition to communities and their efforts to help with conserving and protecting biodiversity. And finally, when you document what you have, you're always in a better position to seek future funding. Thank you.
All right, so this brings us to what type of areas might we be looking to add to this federal database? And the database is being used to track how close Canada is to reaching that 30 by 30 goal. The first is that the space needs to have clearly defined boundaries. And so that usually means that we need some GIS data to show what the outline of the space is. The space also needs to have biodiversity value. And so that means that it's achieving in situ conservation of the biodiversity there. Importantly, there needs to be a mechanism in place that's stopping all actions that are not compatible with conservation. That can be unique to each local government, but some common ways that we demonstrate that are conservation covenants, restrictive zoning types, or park use bylaws. And finally, we need to know if the place is intended to be protected forever. All right, so what does BC Nature help with in this process? I've just outlined the 4 main criteria for a space to qualify for this federal database, but actually the process to demonstrate if an area actually meets those criteria can be quite lengthy, a lot of paperwork involved. And so what BC Nature does is does all of that paperwork for a local government to lessen the load and take away that need of capacity that we know that a lot of staff don't have. And we would follow up with that assessment by also registering the information on the database for you. Of course, checking in at each point to make sure that you're happy with each choice and selection we've made. At the same time, we're also encouraged to engage with our local clubs and promote this project for excitement, as well as some helpful information that they might be able to provide. A lot of our naturalist clubs have information about the biodiversity in these sites through monitoring data that we can't access in other places. So this is really helpful because they like to add to the work. And finally, this work is kind of a form of validation for the processes that are being done in your municipality. So we can provide some information about what types of protective mechanisms you have and how they line up with these federal criteria. And if you're interested, we can also help you identify if there's any areas that are close to qualifying, but are just lacking a few things to meet that or cross that finish line. So we can help you figure that out too, if you're interested. So we'll end there just to open it up for any questions on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I'll look to council for any questions of our presenters. Councillor Wake, followed by Councillor Fast, followed by Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Are you doing any work with the province in terms of Crown land? Because Crown land on, it would be great if we could add our municipally controlled land, but we don't control Crown lands and they represent a good portion of Bowen Island.
Yeah, so we are not doing the assessments for Crown land. The provincial government is doing that themselves directly. But the majority of the areas that are Crown land that already qualify are actually already on the database, unless they are leased Crown land to a local government. And then that is a bit more of a specific situation to each lease agreement.
Thank you, Councillor Wake. Councillor Fast.
Thank you, and hello, Andrew. I met Andrew at a Howe Sound Community Forum, I think when we were in Whistler. And I've been following this process up by bringing recommendations to Islands Trust Council around the full Montreal Protocol, the Kunming-Montreal COP15 agreement and or framework, I guess. Anyway, so I've been looking at this from the Islands Trust side. I asked them some questions, and I'll be and I was talking to Carla too. So it sounds like this is great. If Carla can work with you folks to help make sure you capture all of our parks, because not all of our parks are easy to identify from a distance, because some of them are still zoned residential, even though we know they're parks. And so that will really help. And then I can help coordinate things with Islands Trust later to make sure we all are on the same page and we all know what's what. So that's great. I'm in support, and I'd be happy to move the motion when you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Morse.
I just wanted to clarify that the first step is getting all of our parks and Crippin Park and everything else onto the registry.
Through the chair, yeah, that's that step one. So BC Nature will assess the different lands for us to see if they're appropriate for registration, and then they would be registered.
Okay, so is that going to take a lot of your time?
No, BC Nature would be doing the work for us.
Okay, great. And then I had the same question that Councillor Wake had with respect to our crown lands, because there's been studies done of them and that sort of thing, and they are large trees and historical, what's the term for first growth? Anyhow, so hopefully they could get evaluated as part of the process.
Response from our manager.
Sure, thank you, through the chair. So in the lands that are already registered, they do include the old growth management areas. So some of our hamlets are already registered. So they consider that another effective conservation, OECM, another effective conservation measure.
Does that show up on our maps anywhere?
The old growth management areas, no, not on a BOMAP. But
It's on the Islands Trust maps.
Yeah, on MapIt, and there's on the federal, there's a federal online map that's pretty easy to access. Just Google it.
Thank you. And seeing no further discussion, over to Councillor Fast for the recommendations.
Councillor Fast is delighted to hear all this interest in declaring Crown lands as conservation areas, and she'd be happy to help with that. Thank you, fellow councillors. I would like to move that council support participation in the Municipal Protected Areas project and direct staff to work with BC Nature to include municipally owned areas, natural areas in the Canadian Protected and Conserved Areas database.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. And many thanks to our presenters for being here virtually today, and also for the work that you do in conserving and cataloging and bringing awareness to our natural assets here in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are on item, thank you to our manager of environment as well. Thank you so much for that. 8.2, award of contract for wastewater outfall design. We have our director of engineering here.
This is the second 8.2, so.
That's right.
Just flagging that.
Or to 8.2. So this is 8.2B. Award of contract for wastewater outfall design. Over to the director.
Council. So we've recently talked about the wastewater outfall situation. Are not in compliance with our current discharge with the current situation. The outfall needs to be replaced. We've recently initiated the process of borrowing the necessary funds. We're estimating about 1.2 million to complete the outfall replacement program. And we've also confirmed recently that there are sufficient funds in the sewer service area reserves to proceed with the design. And that's something that we should do as soon as we're able to. What we're recommending here is that we proceed with the detailed design work using the firm that previously completed the environmental impact study and preliminary design work as part of the larger urban systems pre-design report on the overall wastewater plan. So that would be a departure from the purchasing policy, which typically required some form of competitive procurement. That Great Pacific leaded that EIS redesign are best position to advance the detailed design efficiently and effectively. They have also the working relationship with Urban Systems, who has have some time included in their fee proposal to make sure that we're consistent with all of our ongoing efforts related to this system. So that's what we're recommending. There would need to be a process of posting notice of intent to direct award, BC bid, period of 2 weeks, substantially less time than if we're going through an RFP process or other sort of competitive procurement. And it is important that we proceed as soon as possible. So this would allow us to proceed with the design while the borrowing process is underway, and hopefully be in a position to have the borrowed funds in place in the fall, along with the completed design, and be ready to move quickly into construction of the new outfall. So that's just a quick summary of the report and recommendations. If there's any questions from council?
Yes, lots. So we'll start with Councillor Saunders, Councillor Morse, Councillor Getty, Councillor Fast. Over to you, Councillor Saunders.
Popular subject. Thank you. My only question is in that report, I know we've got, I believe it's a 75 millimeter pipe right now in the report, recommended 250. Is that what we're going ahead with? Is the 250? Is that the plan?
That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Morse.
I noticed that the letter from the Great Pacific that's included in the agenda package is dated September 28th, 2023. So is the price still good and are they available?
Yes. And yes. Confirm that. Holding the same price.
So the estimated time frame now would be?
The estimated time frame is
Design would proceed in late April and be complete before the borrowed funds are available.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just reading from page 2 and 3.
Yeah, so. And when is the results of the counter petition supposed to be available?
Close on May 6th.
So how can we start before we know if we've got the funds?
we can't, we can't start with any kind of construction until we have the borrowed funds. But we do have enough in reserves to proceed with the
So this is
design
the design at this point.
in parallel with the borrowing process.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Over to you, Councillor Getty.
So I'm pretty sure you're saying that the 250 millimeter diameter outfall pipe was recommended. My recollection was that it was the 200 mm that was recommended and that had increased that to 250 for potential future growth as some sort of a insurance, I suppose. So we're now saying that the 250 mm was recommended by the
Yes. Yeah, that was what was recommended by the redesign report.
So I had asked very early on if the 75 mm was handling the existing effluent that was created by the users. That what was the volume that then would be expected? What are we building in terms of expected future use if we're getting up from 75 mm to 250 mm? And I've never received answers to that question. And that's a fundamental question for me. If we're building something that's gigantic and assuming that we can grow into that, that's a fundamental premise in terms of the area that is supplied, that this sewage district supplies, whether or not that could even remotely support that type of user, that number of users. So,
Yeah, the existing 75 mm outfall isn't really handling the current load. It's undersized. It has to be pumped. And so it operates like a force main, and that what you get is entrained air in the effluent, and that gets pushed down the pipe, and that is likely the cause of the number of problems that we're having with pipes bubbling, ballasts breaking, in some cases the pipe floating. So it's not, it's undersized currently for its current use.
That is one theory for why we've had the problems. That be fair?
That's one likely theory of why we've had the problems. Yeah.
All right. So if it's a specific volume, one of the other reports that we've had talked about the 75 mm handling 240 cubic meters of effluent a day, something like that. I'm not sure if that's the exact number. So if we're building out to 250, what is that in terms of the expectation for volumes? And how does that then extrapolate back to the numbers of people?
Yeah, I can remember you asking that, and I did provide those numbers. It sounds like they may not have made their way to you, but I can certainly resend that information.
All right.
But
Do you know offhand what the numbers are?
I don't know off the top of my head what the numbers are. But 240 is the capacity of the current plant. And so it's probably, I don't know, so it's probably something like 300.
Well, the difference between 75 mm and 250 is 4 times, is it not?
Yeah, but what you should have, the size of the pipe to handle current use should be a 200 mm outfall pipe. If it was designed properly, that's what it should be. So if you were replacing the pipe strictly for current use, you wouldn't replace it with a 75 mm pipe, you'd replace it with a 200 mm pipe. So that it could be discharged by gravity.
Thank you, Councillor Getty. Moving on to Councillor Fast.
Thank you. As I recall, there've been all kinds of concerns about the pumps as well for pushing the effluent down the pipe in the past. And the various design issues. I'm in favor of this recommendation. My question is might be a really stupid one. Is there going to be a way that if a big boat, some kind of big boat comes in the night and anchors near the pipe, is there gonna be, is the outfall going to be protected from that kind of random activity? Anchoring, pulling?
I mean, it will be better protected than the current pipe in that the ballast and anchoring will be a lot more robust. It's not something that you can 100% protect against. The other thing that we could do is improve our signage. That there is signage currently, but it could be a lot bigger and more prominent.
If they're coming in at night. Okay, thank you. It wasn't as stupid a question maybe as I thought.
No.
Thank you, and I'm relieved that the reserves can cover this design part. And I think I'm concerned that the sewage treatment plant is outside of our permit, and now Ministry of Environment is looking at us. I don't want to look at us very hard. I don't want to, because I understand that the registration side of it means more monitoring from government agencies, more reporting from staff. I prefer to get going quickly to reassure Ministry of the Environment that we're taking it seriously. And so I'm in support of this motion, and I'll be happy to move it when and if you're ready for that.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Wake.
Just following up on Councillor Getty's questions. I'm wondering how the decision was made initially for it to be pumped, and now we want it to be a gravity feed. And if it had a larger pipe but was pumped, would we still have the entrained air problem? Does that happen no matter how large the pipe is?
No, we would, I mean, that's related to the effluent being pumped, is the trained air problem. And I'm not sure why the outfall pipe is undersized and what decisions led to that. Just that it is. That it was, maybe that it was adequate for gravity discharge at one point. Pumps had to be added. Keep up. Not really sure.
Okay, and in any case, reducing the size from 250 to 200 or less would that be much of a cost savings?
It would be about $100,000 cost difference on a $1.2 million project. It's not significant. And that was one of the reasons why in the pre-design report of 250 pipe size was recommended, because it's should be the type of infrastructure that you install for 40, 50 years. Should be looking to the future.
So the anchoring is going to be a lot more substantial.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Morse.
I have some vague recollection that things like sewer outfalls and piping are shown on marine charts. So are we going to make sure that the marine charts that are published and available online show this outfall line?
That's something to look into.
Back to you, Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I'm going to move the motion. I move that council direct staff to award the contract for design of the new marine wastewater outfall to Great Pacific Consulting Limited for an amount not to exceed 123,547, excluding GST.
Moved by Councillor Fast. Seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Nay.
That motion carries. Councillor Getty in opposition. Thank you to our Director of Engineering. And moving on to 8.3, we have an update from our CAO.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just provide a brief update just on the community center project. I'm sure that everybody is continues to be concerned and frustrated as to why we're now seeing tarps instead of metal roofing on the center. And so the update from the builder is that they're still waiting to secure absolute confirmation from the
Inspectors.
Well, it's not from the roofing inspector itself, but it's from the roofing association, which provides the warranty for the roof, that they're okay with the materials that are there. There's, as I've said before, there's multiple layers to the roof, and the base layers have been given the green light. And we did see the constructor remove some of the insulation and replace all of that, and then properly seal up the top layer. And then they put tarps over top to further protect it until we can get confirmation that the warranty will be 100% intact. And then they can apply the roofing material. And I'm told that the bulk of the roofing material has already been formed and it is on site, waiting to go once we have the green light. I'm told within a couple of weeks, but we all know the way things tend to go with construction projects, so we'll wait and see how that progresses. Again, inside the building, it's coming along pretty remarkably. It's pretty neat to walk through the building and get a sense of how the building will really feel. I'm pretty sure all the glazing is up in all of the rooms, and we're getting close to the point where we're going to be putting some of the other flooring finishes on, and so it's pretty exciting time inside the building. In terms of finishing, we haven't got we're still operating on a previous month's schedule, and so they're still targeting a June handover date. And so I imagine that might be pushed out a little bit further when we get the next scheduled update. So keep you posted, and that's it.
Thank you. Any questions for the CAO? Councillor Wick?
It's been mentioned here that we might be able to go for a tour.
Oh, definitely.
So
anytime.
We just ask.
Yeah. Yeah, you have an open standing invitation, so just contact me and we'll arrange that. Ideally, we could do it together, taking multiple councillors at the same time. So let me know if you're interested, and we'll try to secure a date that works for us. And if we can also do multiple times.
I'm interested.
Great. Thank you to our CAO. On to 10.1 minutes of the Housing Advisory Committee. There's a recommendation that council approve 2024 Housing Advisory Committee work plan. Can I have someone move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Wake, seconded by Councillor Morse. And perhaps just a couple of comments on the work plan or anything from the view of our council liaisons on the Housing Advisory Committee.
I find it.
So I'm going to comment on one of the things that doesn't include. It's the work that we're going to be requesting to set up something to explore community housing organization. But presumably we can have that next meeting.
That would be a council referral, so it would automatically get.
Okay. Any further comments or discussion? Councillor Fast?
Yeah, I looked at the list of tasks here. It's quite a big list. And I'm looking at page 261 and 262. And congratulations on the Housing Accelerator Fund, the group's contribution towards that, whatever it was, and the grants that are coming in. And it looked good to me. Keep up the good work.
Okay.
Thanks to the committee.
Yes.
I think Daniel is owed a big vote of thanks for the housing fund.
Well, of course, but I thought the committee was helping with these things. Right?
Not that one in particular.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw it down there at the bottom, completed Housing Accelerator Fund application. I assumed that was part of the group. I'm interested in your work, so I was trying to read things into it. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Section 11, new business update to council on Metro Vancouver business. Metro Vancouver Regional Parks Committee meeting happened last week. I was pleased to note that Bowen Island's documentation was attached to that agenda, and discussions amongst my fellow committee members there were much more objective and supported by staff. There is not much coming up in the next 2 weeks. There is a Metro Vancouver Mayor's Committee meeting where the executive director of FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, will be doing a presentation on their pre-advocacy campaigns. And then later on, Metro Vancouver is nominating itself for a number of UBCM awards. So that's pretty much the only business there. On TransLink, I would expect, so TransLink has just released its annual report for anyone that's interested. There are some interesting changes to governance in the organization as well, which I expect to be announced in the near future, but not a whole lot coming publicly out of that organization. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I will turn it over to our Island trustees for an update on Island's trust business.
Well, I can report that the hiring committee for the CAO has been meeting bi-weekly, and the group of people of the subcommittee that was working at looking at all of the RFPs for the consultants to help with the hiring. There were 12 applicants. We thought there'd be 3 or 4, and so it took them 30 or 40 hours work to go through that, and they've narrowed it down to 4, with 1 very much in the lead. And we had a meeting this morning. We've been working with the public service people in Victoria to try and help with the process. And there's specific questions that have to go back to the consultants, and then there's another meeting coming up next week in terms of trying to make a recommendation to the hiring committee, people to hire. So we're running out of time, and now we're also looking at whether or not to get an interim CAO, whether the CAO can continue for a little while to help us out, whether or not we go in-house. So that's something else that we've been worrying about, and that is becoming more and more of a concern. The governance committee that I'm involved with, there's a bunch of internal stuff going on that I'm learning patience, and I'm writing very diplomatic long letters and trying to sort that out, which is a lot of effort. But otherwise, I think the work of the trust in general is going along quite well.
Thank you.
I'll just follow up briefly. The March Trust Council, we passed the budget, as you know, so now coming up next month will be the presentation to council of the draft trust policy statement, which is the update of the big umbrella over all of the islands, OCPs for all the other islands, and with First Nations input included. So that'll be the first time trustees see that draft, and we'll all see it together at Trust Council. And then as a special meeting. And then in June is the next trust council regular meeting where we'll have the regular business, and I'm sure that will be discussed there. So that just something to, anybody's welcome to come to trust council meetings. I'm not sure about the special one presenting the draft, but I can find out if anybody's interested in all that. I think it's even available on our calendars when trust council happens on the Bowen Island Municipal calendar that's on the homepage. I believe that's there. Yeah. So anybody can find out about it. And, let me know if anybody wants information about how to find out more about any of these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for trustees? Councilor Morse?
Just a curiosity question. I'm looking at the document in our agenda, and I've got it open on my iPad, and maybe that's the problem. But there's a whole bunch of what are obviously links in here, and none of them seem to work.
Which document are you speaking?
The whatever agenda item.
This is 12.5.
Yeah.
Is the highlights, meeting highlights?
Yeah.
That's a subscription thing, so that comes to.
No. I've opened that link I use agenda notes, and I've opened that link. And I've now tried to open what looks like links that are in the document, and they don't work.
So this is a tech support issue that could probably be talked about.
Yeah,
offline.
and it's really frustrating with their agendas too, that you have to open up a 500-page PDF and, yeah.
I can speak to that one. I have brought a recommendation on behalf of a little working group to the last trust council that they provide, like Bowen does, both an HTML agenda and a PDF agenda. And they're in the process of upgrading their software and stuff, so it's good timing. So that we'll trust council will hear about that from staff in September. And these things take a lot of time when you're running on small staff among so many islands. So that's coming. And one of the things you might want to do, I used to be able to find it at the website. I had the same problem as you did, finding the highlights document, because if you find it at the website, there's a way to, you can click around.
No,
But
I read the press release, and so I was able to click through the stuff, but I didn't. It was just frustrating that if it was on here as an information item and any of our citizens, if they read them, clicked on things that wouldn't work. But I didn't know whether it was an iPad issue versus a laptop issue.
I think it might be a PDF issue, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Moving on to question period. I'll look in the gallery as well as our corporate officer online to see if there's anybody here for question period. Does not appear to be. With that, and we will move on to item 14, which is adjournment. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Opposed, and that carries unanimously. So we'll take a 10-minute break and then
Meetings are posted, correct?
come back the next.